even having the experience I have no idea what the twin flame journey is. The only thing I do know is my experiences and how that's affected me and changed the course of my life. It's cool to hear other people talk about it, because for something that we can't really define, because I think its true definition is so nuanced and beyond what we can grasp in this realm, it is nice to share story and put the pieces together through that.
Welcome to Beyond the Veil, stories of twin flames, divine union, and mystical encounters. Sit back, relax, and listen to your story today. So our next guest is a good friend of mine, Amber Padilla Muse. She is a tattoo artist and a healer out of Long Beach, and she's here to tell her twin flame story. Hi, Amber.
Hi, Kimber.
I'm so blessed to have you here with me.
Thank you for having me. And I'm really excited that you're doing this.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. So go ahead and tell your story.
Well, I want to reiterate what I just said to you, because I think it's the best way to start the story is that I know nothing about this journey, but I know what I've experienced and the way that that's changed me. And it's been definitely impactful. And so I met my twin flame in 2018, and he DM'd me on Instagram. I don't know how he found me. And he was asking about a tattoo. I had a picture posted of me with my adoption symbol tattoo. And he reached out and was like, oh, I would love to get this tattooed. I'm also adopted. I sing about it in my music. And I thought that was really cool to be able to tattoo that on someone else. And so he was going to be in town for a show soon, and we scheduled it for that time. I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know his music either. But yeah, he came by, and when he showed up, he gifted me a macaw feather, and it just instantly felt really easy just to be amongst each other. And the conversation was easy, and he was kind of oversharing about where he was at in his life and stuff going on. I was like, oh, he's really telling me all of his stuff. And funny enough, at that time, I had worked with this woman who is the mother of this other musician who's really good friends with him. And so he knew this woman. And I can't remember if this was planned or if it was by chance, but I was tattooing her after him. And I told her, come a little bit early so you guys can say hi to each other. We'll surprise him. It'll be really sweet. And so she came, and they had a reunion, and he was surprised, and it was really cool. And so we already had some crossover in our lives. And I was finishing his tattoo, and she was taking photos. And so I have photos of us from the first day we met. And then he left, and I was sitting with her, and she's like, there's something here. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I just met this person. I don't know him. I'm also talking to someone. Sounds like he has a relationship, that he was working through stuff with her. And I was like, yeah, I don't really see it, but okay. And she was right. And we stayed in touch very on and off from that point. And so I would say like 6 months later, we were both single at this point. The things we were in had come to an end. And it seems like they were both pretty messy too, which was interesting. And we had one phone call conversation that lasted a good couple of hours. And then he was going to come out again. And he asked to come by and hang out. And I was like, sure. I didn't really think anything of it. I invited him over, even though we hadn't really talked much. And we only met that one time when I tattooed him. And yeah, he came by. He was nervous. He literally told me that, which I thought was funny because I'm like, why? We're just hanging out and like eating sushi. And we went and ran around on the beach because I was living right on the beach at the time, and came back to my place and lit a fire. And it was, yeah, it just felt really easy. It just felt like there was no awkwardness of getting to know each other or being around each other. I think I was in a point where I was like, oh, I just am excited to meet more creative people and build these relationships and just have fun. And so that's how I looked at it. And so, yeah, we lit a fire, we watched a movie. Um, he played his guitar, and then I was like falling asleep. And then he came and he put my head like right next to the guitar and kept playing. And it was just really, really sweet and cute. And I still wasn't thinking anything romantic of it. I was just riding the wave of whatever. And yeah, that was our only hangout. And again, we just kind of casually stayed in touch after that. And then maybe a few months later, my birthday was approaching, and I think I was turning 28. And I felt really called to leave, to go somewhere. I needed something. I just needed to get out of my normal stuff. I knew I needed something in my life to change, but I didn't know what. And I knew he had a house in Oregon with some property, and it was in the countryside. And I was like, that sounds nice. So I called him up and I was like, hey, are you cool if I come out and stay at your house for a few nights? You don't even have to pay attention to me. You don't have to like do anything. I just need to get out of the city. I just want to be in nature and be secluded. And also, I would like to do mushrooms for the first time. So if you're down to do that with me, because I know you've done them many times before, I would really love that, but no pressure. Which is such a weird thing to ask of someone that you like still barely know and have maybe been in person with twice in your life. But again, this was abnormal behavior for me, but I wasn't thinking, there was no concern. No part of it was like, there's an issue here. So when I asked him, he's like, well, of course, like, come on by. And yeah, so I went to Oregon for the first time and stayed at his house. And it was just really sweet. I was really just approaching everything like it's a friendship, and uh, just being really adventurous and open to new experiences. And everything was very platonic, at least on my end. It was all around, but I think he obviously like had other thoughts that I wasn't even aware of. But yeah, we had a really sweet time, and he like gifted me birthday gifts, and they were all very thoughtful. And it was, I think, the second night or the second day that we were going to do our psilocybin journey together. And I was very nervous, and I was like, I don't know what to expect, really. Am I going to be able to like have control over what I'm doing? Am I still going to be me? He was like, yeah, you're still you. It's just different. And so we set a really beautiful altar outside, and we set an intention and a prayer, and we ate the mushrooms raw. It was a penis envy mushroom, if I remember correctly. And we didn't measure anything. We just ate a stem, which the stems on those are pretty big. And his horses are walking around, and we're just sitting on the grass. And then we start walking through the forest, and it starts to hit. Like, I'm feeling the effects of it. The bushes are breathing. I'm yawning a bunch. I'm like, something's happening. And then we find this really cool spot to sit facing this river, this stream that went past his house. And then it became full on. And I remember at one point, I'm just like sitting in this bed of moss. It was so dreamy. And at one point he puts his hat on and then rainbows just pour down his face and he's laughing because I'm laughing at him and then his teeth are green, like lime green. And so we're laughing harder and I was like, this is so trippy. Like what? And it was just really playful and fun. And then after that we get up and we walk to a different part of the forest. And there's this tree with these, I think the spider webs were slightly wet from previous rain, but the sun was hitting this like skinny, branchy tree in just the right way that she was just like glowing and sparkling. We both stop at the same time and look at each other like, oh my gosh, look at her. And so we were already kind of just on the same wavelength and we're just kind of walking around the forest. And I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, it's like virtual reality. It's like Avatar, the movie. It's cool, but like, where's the magic, you know? And out of nowhere, he's like, Amber, stop trying to figure it out. And that has stuck with me ever since. And I need to remind myself that constantly. And the way that he said it, it's just like one of those core things that rings in your head. And I was like, oh shit, you're right. Okay. Need to let it go. Stop trying to figure this out and just enjoy the ride. And so we walk through the forest and get out to the opening where the grass is and where the horses are walking. And there's this like small bridge he has back there because there's a stream. And we're sitting on the bridge and we realize that when you sit on it and you talk, you can feel the vibrations of our voice through the wood. And so we're just playing around with that for a while. And then after that, I lay down on my back and my eyes are closed. And earlier that day, he had asked me, what did I dream the night before? We would ask each other often, and I couldn't remember. So as I'm laying there with my eyes closed, suddenly I remember what the dream was. And I open my eyes to tell him, and then it's happening in front of me before I could even speak. And what it was is that I'm laying there and I see a bald eagle flying above us. And my dream was that we would see a bald eagle today. And so I'm tripping out. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's happening right now. And so I go to tell them like, hey, is that a bald eagle? And he looks up and he's like, yeah. I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, just take your eye up there and you can see the white on the head and the white on the tail. And I was like, oh yeah, we're on mushrooms. I can do that. Okay. And then I did it. And I was like, this is my dream. Like, this is what I dreamt last night. He was like, whoa, that's trippy. He's like, you should like go back in and see what else you see. And so I close my eyes again. I'm laying there. And then this time he scoots behind me. So he's sitting cross-legged and my head's like right in front of him. And then he puts his thumb on my third eye like this. I don't know why, he just did. And apparently when he did this, he said he saw like a bunch of geometry like coming out and around. And so he's doing that. And I have my eyes closed and I start seeing this vision. And it's this girl and she's walking up a staircase. And it feels really familiar. I don't know if it's a past life or if it's a dream I've had, but I'm watching this girl walk up the staircase. And out of nowhere, he's like, oh my gosh, I see it. And I was like, see what? And he's like, staircase. And so I jump up because I had said nothing. And I jump up and I'm like, what? And he's like, I saw what you were thinking. And I'm like baffled because this is my first experience with psilocybin. I'm like, is this normal? Like, what? And he's like, yeah, I saw what you were thinking. You let me in. And I was like, whoa, okay. So we are both just in shock, but also in awe and just wow. Um, and I don't remember much after that. Like it slowly started to wear off after that. And once we were back in our normal selves, I asked him, I was like, hey, so does this kind of stuff happen normally when you do psilocybin? And he was like, no, I have never had that happen. And I have done this with friends, partners, never had that happen. And I just didn't know what to think. I had nothing to compare it to. So to me, I'm like, whoa, this is really cool. Seems normal to me because like that's my only experience. And I don't know, this was like one of those life-changing moments where I realized that there's so much more to all of this than I even thought. And I was already an open person and a very curious person of, you know, the mystical and the animate forces. But this, to experience it, I was like, wow, I can't look at the world the same. I can't look at life the same, knowing that we can do this, that we can read each other's minds, see each other's thoughts. Like that's possible. We just did that. And so we had like one more day we spent together. We tattooed each other and just talked. And then he took me to the airport that night and my flight got delayed like 3 times. Like to the point where it got delayed till the next morning. And I had to call him to come pick me back up. And he doesn't live close to the airport. Thankfully, he didn't go straight home. He went to a friend's house to tell his friend this crazy story of ours. So I'm like, can you please pick me up? Like, I'm sorry to be a burden, but I don't want to sleep in the airport tonight. I'd rather sleep at your house. And he was like, yeah, I'm actually right down the street. I'm at my friend's house telling him about this crazy thing. And so he picks me up and then takes me back home. And I walk into his house and I'm like, wow, it's like I live here now. And he's like, well, you could. I'm like, okay, calm down. Cause like the whole time we were hanging out too, it was all very platonic. Like nothing was happening except for all this magical stuff that was happening. Right. And, I remember writing in my journal too about being on the land at his house, how it felt so familiar. Like I'd been there before. And so the next morning he takes me to the airport and I'm on the plane and that's finally I'm alone and I can kind of start to process everything that happened. And I just can't shake the feeling. I'm like, I feel like I've known him. And I don't really get that. Like I don't remember having that feeling with anyone before. And I just was like, and I remember texting it to him at some point. Like, I just feel like I've known you. And, yeah, it was just such a new, familiar thing. And so we stay in touch after that. He maybe comes out to hang out a few more times. And I continue to keep it very platonic, like very, I don't know yet. So we're just going to be friends until I know for sure. And, but he was definitely courting me. And I think finally at some point, it sucked too, because I was like getting over being sick when we had our first kiss. So I tasted like medicine. And so it wasn't like this romantic thing. It was like the taste of like herbal medicines, and which is fine. But I remember being at my house one time and he was there and I'd given him a gift and he went and kissed me. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing that now. And whatever time we finally made love for the first time, I woke up the next morning and we hung out for a while, talked, and then he went to the studio to record because he would come to LA frequently for recording, and anytime he would come hang out. And so then he left and I felt really weird after that. Like as soon as he left, I'm just like walking around my house and I just feel kind of dizzy and discombobulated. I'm just kind of touching things as I walk into the rooms and I'm like, what am I doing? Like what am I supposed to be doing right now? What's going on? And so I sit down on my couch and I just feel dizzy and weird. And I was like, what is wrong with me? And I hear a voice say, that's your twin flame. And I didn't really know what that meant at that time. Like I had read years ago about what a soulmate is, a twin flame, a karmic partner. I'd like briefly read those things, but I never thought twice about them or really dove into that. So it wasn't something I was looking for or something I was well versed in. And so when I heard that, I was like, I don't even know if I like him like that though. Like we're just getting to know each other. And I mean, I like him as a friend, of course, but I don't know if I'm ready for that. And I didn't really know what that even meant. And so I didn't share it with anyone. I just kept it to myself because what am I supposed to do with that? And I just remember continuing to feel really physically strange, like going to work, driving in my car, just feeling really ungrounded. Just having like a lot of energy going on inside of me. And I texted him at some point, was like, hey, I've been feeling really weird. Do you feel anything? And he was like, I can feel what everyone's feeling. And I was like, that sounds like a lot for a musician who's around a lot of people at certain times. So I was like, okay. And I didn't really speak too much about it to him. He had a lot of stuff going on in his life at the time. And I think that really blocked me from asking more questions and speaking up to the things I was experiencing and saying what he was experiencing. And I remember feeling really physically strange. And at one point, I went to my acupuncturist and I was telling her all these things I was feeling. And she's also a very like spiritual, mystical person. She's not like your typical acupuncturist. Um, and I'm telling her everything I'm feeling, and I'm just sounding like a crazy person, probably. And she was like, yeah, that happens when you meet your twin flame. And I was like, what? Again, I didn't ask too much because I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Just help me. I just feel so odd. And so it was really cool the way she explained it to me. And this makes the most sense. It's, because what I was feeling was like my insides were stretching, but I like didn't, my outsides weren't stretching enough for it. And it's like growing pains, right? Like when your bones just grow a huge amount in a short time and everything else has to catch up and it's really uncomfortable. And so she kind of explained it to me like that, like we need to open things so you can hold this energy that's coming in. And I was like, okay, do whatever you have to do because I feel insane. I feel nauseous. I feel all these weird things and I just want to feel normal again. And then she was like, have the numbers started? And I was like, yeah, actually, what do you mean? Like angel numbers? She's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, actually they have. And at this time that was happening a lot. A lot of synchronicities were happening. Uh my dreams were getting more colorful and intense and all of the things. And so she was helping me. And I remember driving out to see you for a session one time and still feeling weird physical things. And I was texting him and telling him, and he was like, don't worry, it's all part of your ascension. I was like, does he know something I don't know? Because he said it kind of nonchalantly. And I'm like, I mean, that makes sense, but also, do you know what's happening? Because again, I never told him. I never said, hey, I think you're my twin flame. Have you been experiencing X, Y, and Z? I just let it all happen. And so, and he would say things like this from time to time where I'm like, okay, he must know something. Um, so he said that, and then I went to go see you, and I was telling you everything I was experiencing and feeling, and you said the same thing. You're like, oh, this happens when you meet your twin flame. And I was like, yeah, I keep hearing that. What do I do? And um I'm really grateful I had you and my acupuncturist to help me because without you guys, I would have maybe gone crazy because it is a lot of energy all at once. And, it's like when people talk about a Kundalini awakening, and there's so many ways for this to happen. It doesn't have to be this way, but when it all comes on at once, it's a lot. And I wouldn't choose that. It'd be nicer if it came on like in bits and pieces. But yeah, I'm just so grateful I had help in managing that level of energy and that shift, because it really does feel like my concept of reality was changing, and my world was kind of flipping upside down without anything external really even happening. It was more something in me was shifting, and the way I see things and the way I relate to them was shifting. And it also started with what I experienced in my psilocybin journey with him, but then it continued with all the synchronicities that were happening and all the energetic things that were happening. And I mean, it was just strange, like one point he goes by an artist name, but I asked him at one point what his real name was earlier on. And he told me, and his name is the same name as my adoptive father's name, which was really interesting. And that's where a good amount of my trauma lies. And when he told me that, we both looked at each other and we're like, it's going to be karmic. Like that, there's a reason for that, And, we also came from very similar backgrounds of being adopted by these middle-class families that are, of a different cultural background than us. And all the challenges that come with that disconnection from your mother, disconnection from your culture, but also like being able to have the privileges that we had that we wouldn't have otherwise. And so we had this very similar origin story. And then we both became artists of some sort. And I think for both of us, our art is what saved us. And so it was already just so much overlapping. And I remember one time I was tattooing his biological mom and two of his biological sisters. And I really liked her. She was such a magical woman. The first time I met her, actually, I came out and she was telling me she wants an orca whale tattoo. And I told her, I was like, oh, I just dreamt about an orca whale last night, which was happening a lot at that time. Orca whales and bears were very common in my dreams. And when I told her that, she was like, okay. Like she knew something I didn't know. And so when I was tattooing her, I was tattooing the orca whale on her, talking to her more. And she was telling me how when she first met me, there was this purple aura around me. And that when she saw the two of us together, there was this protective aura around the both of us. And I was like, so other people can see what I've been feeling. Like it was so reassuring and so beautiful to hear. And yeah, it was just magical stuff like that was happening throughout this whole year that him and I were together. And there was this other time, I think it was shortly after that, I was working on a client and I was tattooing his chest. And I was thinking about a memory that I had from the night before with me and my twin flame. And it was like a funny memory. So in my head, I'm like laughing. And out of nowhere, my client's like, I feel really happy. And I was like, well, why? He was like, I don't know. I just feel really happy. And I looked at my hands and where they were, and my hands were right on his heart. And I was like, oh my gosh, did I do that? And this was before I was trained in Reiki or anything. I didn't really know much what Reiki was at that point. And so I saw my twin flame that night and I told him, and he was like, yeah, you did an energy transfer. I'm like, I'm not even trying to do this stuff. And so it was great because it opened my eyes to these things and then like pushed me in that direction to really hone in on these abilities and just this way of being. And so, yeah, lots of weird stuff was happening. The dreams were really magical. I remember having this one dream about riding on the back of an orca whale. It was me and him. And we were freeing these caged birds or something. And we like let them all free. And then we rode off on the orca whale. And shortly after I had that dream, he texted me one morning. He's like, I had a dream I was riding on the back of a whale. And I was like, what kind of whale? He was like, it was an orca whale. It's like, of course it was. And so this was one of those days that so at this time I was building my relationship with my guides and talking to them because I needed that connection, but also was opening up that connection for me. And I think this is common, but I had a lot of doubt about what this whole thing was because it seemed so crazy. I couldn't really talk to anyone about it other than you and my acupuncturist who have experienced it. And so there was a lot of like little moments and little synchronicities and things that I just had to keep to myself. And so I would ask for signs often, like if this is, if this is really what this is, can you please send me a sign and make it really obvious and clear? Like really give it to me. And so that reoccurring dream was one of them. Also with my dreams at the time, and this hasn't stopped, is my dreams were always very telling of what was going on with him. And whether I listened or not, they would inform me of what was happening. So we were seeing each other throughout 2019 and I was going to shows and it was just all so magical. And I felt once I got past the feeling dizzy and nauseous, which comes and goes, but other than that, I felt so good. Like I felt shiny. I felt like I had all this energy. I felt more intuitive naturally with my clients, just talking to them about stuff. And I had just learned how to listen to my inner knowing. And I just felt like this really powerful goddess. And it felt effortless, but it's not effortless. So that all goes away one day. And then it comes back. But yeah, I was just riding this high. And I kind of knew that twin flames don't always end up together. So I kind of just anticipated this might end one day, most likely. So just enjoy it while you can.
Like backtrack real quick, like what made you start dating him? Because it's like at some point you're like, this is just, platonic. And then all of a sudden you're like in it.
I think I got out of my own way.
That makes sense.
I just had a block towards men in general, right?
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
And especially this man that just kind of like, hey man, and there's this undeniable connection, obviously. But it was my own unhealed stuff, right? That I couldn't just open up right away.
Yeah.
And in a way he knew that and he saw that because he could see right through me. Like he did have this way of seeing who I was in a way that I couldn't even see yet. Yeah, I think after, I don't know, it just kind of happened.
You just guess kind of fell into it.
Yeah, he had been making effort and I was just kind of like, eh. And so once I stopped doing that, then it just allowed it to happen.
Amazing.
And yeah, I adored him. Like I loved him. I do love him. He was so, it was just like it was like meeting my oldest friend, but with this also like deep, passionate love. And it felt like being on this planet, but being from a different planet and then finally meeting someone from the same planet as you. And so I was like, oh, wow, like I could just be myself with him. I could be more myself with him than I had even been before because he was helping me to open up parts of myself that I had maybe shoved down because of conditioning or trauma or whatever. And I do think that goes the other way too. I do think there was the version of him that I know is there and that I was seeing. I don't think that he saw that for himself.
Right.
And so, because we had both at this point not healed our trauma. I think maybe we thought we were more healed than we were, but I don't think we were ready, obviously.
Right.
And so we're dating and it's magical and it's beautiful and weird things are always happening. I'm seeing numbers constantly. I'm seeing signs constantly. And it just starts to become part of life. Like it's almost funny at a certain point how many you see and the way they show up. And then it starts to change a little bit. And I can feel him pulling away. And I just didn't want to see it. I wanted to just keep riding this wave that we were on, but something was starting to shift several months in. And it was really scary because I was trying not to get attached to this connection that we had, but at the same time, it's hard not to. I mean, it's so life changing to start having these experiences and feel the way that it makes you feel. And so I just ignored everything. Like I ignored my intuition. And again, that was a trauma response to ignore my intuition, to not trust myself. And that was something I had to learn. And so as we kind of start getting in a different space and I see him kind of pulling back, but not letting go. And by the end of the year, I didn't know where we stood and what was happening. And it was sad because it felt like, I mean, magical stuff was still happening on my own. We were long distance. So a lot of the stuff that was happening, it was just me and my life, but it was because something had been ignited. So by the end of the year, I didn't know where we were at, what was going on. Prior to that, I did have a dream about another woman being in the studio with him and like wearing his jacket. And I told him about it. And he was like, oh, that's crazy. Like, mm-hmm. And there was other signs too. And I'm like, I'm not stupid. I mean, he's a musician. Like if he's cheating on me, I'm not the most surprised. And I also had a vision before of, it wasn't even a vision. It was like a feeling. It was like a download of feelings. And it was all the women that he has hurt in the past, or broken their hearts or whatever. And I felt it all at one point and I was like, oh, he's like hurt a lot of women. And I didn't know how far in the past that was. I didn't know what it was pertaining to. But I had these warning signs and I kind of ignored them. And also I wanted to believe that he felt the energy between us and wouldn't ruin it, wouldn't do something like that. And so the last show of his I went to, we were in a weird place but I went and I brought one of my best friends and he just wasn't the same energy as what we started off as, and I probably felt weird too because I could sense, I could feel all of it, but I wasn't in a place to speak about it yet. And so I'm sure he was feeling that I was feeling it and trying to just make it all okay. And so before I left that night, we're hugging each other and I didn't say anything. And he just looks at me and he's like, we're going to be okay. And I just looked at him and I'm like, I hope so. But in my head, I was like, I think something's going to happen. I think this is not going the way we thought it was going to go. And not because of anything between us. It was just our unhealed stuff was boiling up, so to speak, behind the scenes. And we didn't know that's what it was, but that's what it was. And there was many points in their relationship where he would read my mind and like say things without me having to say it. So that added to me not speaking to things because I'm like, well, sometimes I don't have to, and you just know. So, yeah, so a few months after that show, he invites me to go to Santa Barbara where his band and him were recording for something, and they're staying at a friend's house. It was this beautiful house, and it was this whole beautiful thing. And I went, and I could tell things were different. At this point, he was really leaning into his ego, and I was beginning to not recognize him anymore. And I remember walking into that, and like all of his crew is there. And I just remember feeling like everyone knows something that I don't know.
Uh,
And I don't know what it is, but this doesn't feel good. And they're all being nice to me. They all liked me. That wasn't the issue. I just felt something was different. And he was being oddly kind of cold and lacking compassion towards me. It was just like almost weirdly robotic too. And at one point he was on the phone with someone, and I knew it was another girl. Even though whatever they were saying wasn't obvious, I just had a feeling, and I was like, what is happening? And so I start feeling really anxious in my body and kind of sick. And so I stay behind in our room while he goes to do recording, and I'm laying on the couch because I just feel nauseous. And I was talking on the phone with one of my friends, and I don't really remember that helping at all. I was like, I can't explain what I'm feeling, but it's insane. And then I finally realized, like, I have to leave. I have to leave right now. I cannot stay here another second. And so I left abruptly, and I kind of made up an excuse to everyone else as to why, because I didn't want them to be concerned. And I didn't know how to say, like, I'm leaving because I don't know who this guy is anymore. And I feel
wow.
anxiety running through my body because I don't feel comfortable being around him. You know, I couldn't say that to him either.
Crazy.
And so even when I'm saying goodbye to him to get in the car and drive home, he's saying stuff to me that I'm like, he was like complaining about stuff that other people do that he does. And I was like, wow, you're so gone. Like, you're so gone. Even if I pointed out to you right now, you wouldn't even understand. And so I just left, and I drove the 2 hours home, and I just cried. I just needed to cry and get the heck out of there. And I still didn't understand why I was feeling this so, like, why it was so volatile. And I get home, and I'm sitting with it, and I message him, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I feel off, and something about you feels weird. And I just can't, I don't know what's happening. And I think he tried to reassure me of, whatever. But I think part of it too was at this time I had started doing a chakra course. So it was like a 7-week course. Each week you would sit with, we started with the root chakra, and you would sit with a chakra and like do mantras and chants and meditations and certain healing work to help you with whatever comes up with that, power center. And so I was maybe halfway through this, and I was like going full in. I was
Mm.
like the first person in class to start crying. This was my first time healing through actually feeling everything rather than just psychoanalyzing. And so it was just unlocking a different layer. But I also think the energetics of like everything that happened in that whole year leading up to that brought me to that point where I could
Mm-hmm.
even heal in that way or begin to. And so I was already like opening things up. So that's probably why I was just like feeling suffocated by the energy I was around. And so this, I believe, is when I started my sober ego death, which lasted a week long, and it was awful. And I didn't know it could happen like that. Again, I didn't know what this was because everything was kind of new for me. And so for a week straight, I just feel sick. Like my stomach is like twisting, and like it just feels again like your insides are stretching, and you feel nauseous and dizzy, and you're just crying in fetal position, and you don't really know why. And I was just feeling yucky, and I would wake up every day with anxiety. And each day would be a new emotion. Like I remember one day, all I could feel was abandonment
Wow.
towards everyone and everything for no reason. No one was leaving me. No one was mad at me. No, nothing was happening. But that's all I could feel. And I was just like riddled with anxiety. Like, oh my gosh, everyone's going to abandon me. Everyone's going to leave me. And then the next day would be a different emotion. And then the next day, a different one. And I was exhausted. I was like, had to call up work that week. I couldn't do anything. And I went into my acupuncturist and I was telling her what was happening. And I was like, I'm tired. Like, please help me. And she was like, you're having an ego death. I was like, what's that? Like, why? What happened? And I'm like, yes, something is definitely dying. I'm definitely dying right now. And so she did some acupuncture to help me with that. And I talked to one of my other teachers, and she was like, you need to, before you go to sleep tonight, ask that you can work this out in your dream. Tell them you're tired. Tell them you're done. You'd like to work it out in your dream. So I did that and it worked. And I had this really intense emotional dream where I'm yelling at my adoptive parents, like screaming at the top of my lungs, screaming at them, like, you don't listen to me. You're not listening to me. And I look at my adoptive mom and I'm like, I'm in therapy because of you. And then I look at my adoptive dad and you too. And then I wake up after screaming at them and I feel amazing. I feel like a whole new person. There's no more anxiety, no more depression. I felt light. I felt good. And I was like, holy that worked. Thank God, because I couldn't do another day of that. And so, yeah, that was really intense. And now at this point, we're in early 2020 before COVID's about to hit. And I'm having all these experiences, which I'm grateful for because I felt like it was preparing me for the chaos that was going to come for the world. And so I'm having these experiences. And then after COVID actually does hit, I go out to see him. And I hadn't seen him in a few months. And the night before I go to visit him, I also had a visitation, which I was having a lot at that time, as you know.
I remember that.
Yeah. And they're extraterrestrial visitations. And this one was very creepy. I didn't like this one at all. And I also had a dream. And in the dream, I walked into this room and he was there. And he looked like some like Miami dude with the shirt buttoned low and like the gold chain and not his style at all. And that's how he looked. And I'm trying to say something to him and his biological mom is there. And she's like, oh, honey, he can't hear you. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, he can't hear you. And I'm like talking at him and he's just like ignoring me. Like I'm not there. I was like, shoot. So this is the dream I have the night before I'm going to go drive miles and miles to go see him.
Wow.
Which part of me wishes that I listened to myself and didn't go because it didn't go well. But at the same time, I think that needed to happen. And so I go to see him and I remember walking into his house and immediately I was like, I didn't say this to him, but I could feel another woman has been here. And I was like, why are you here, Amber? Why are we doing this? And it goes really bad. It's like somewhat fine for a little while. But again, his ego was taking over. And so this like cold demeanor that is not who he is at his core was becoming who he was to everybody, even me. And so we get in some argument because he's being, in my opinion, sociopathic. And I start crying and I'm like, okay, I'm leaving the next morning. And I called you the next morning and we had a talk because I needed to talk to you about my visitations and stuff and telling you what was kind of happening at that time. And you were like, just give him a really big hug. And I'm glad I listened because that was the last time I saw him in person. And I did. I gave him a really big hug, even though deep down I was so pissed at him. And I left and I just ignored his messages because I just couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that this person that a year prior I was having these magical experiences with, and we could like see each other's souls, is now not that person anymore. And it was just so confusing to me how he could just disappear like that or become this other thing. And we still didn't break up at this point, but it was clear we needed to have a conversation about what are we doing here and why are we still even trying? Like, why neither of us would just let go for some reason. And I remember I was with a girlfriend of mine who knew him long before I knew him. And I had like brought him up or something. And she was like, he's never faithful, right? And I was like, I mean, are you sure? She's like, maybe the first couple of months, but after that, no. And so it felt like her way of telling me, like, hey, I'm not going to tell you, but I'm going to tell you. And that's all I needed because I already knew, I already had so many signs that there was lying going on and I just didn't have proof. And to me, that was enough. And so I called him and we FaceTimed and I just told him like, hey, we should just stop doing this. We should go our separate ways. I don't feel safe in this anymore. I don't feel comfortable. And for me, that was huge because all my relationships prior had ended in some explosion of like cheating, usually cheating. That's my theme. And I always have waited for things to blow up in my face before I walk away. And so this was my first time being like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know for sure, but I just don't feel good. So I need to walk away. And so I felt good after that. I felt really relieved for choosing myself and not having to wonder anymore what is happening and what's not. And it was strange because like he didn't want us to split. But I was like, we're barely together at this point. Like, I don't even know what this is. And he was like, can we like talk about this in like 3 months or something? And I'm like, sure. But I knew like things aren't going to change in 3 months. Like, we both need to heal. And who knows how long that's going to take. So we go our separate ways. And then a month later, like literally a month later, he starts to get canceled. And all this stuff is coming out about him. And my friends that knew we were together were texting me like, are you okay? I'm like, what are you talking about? And then they send me stuff and I'm like, oh God. And so I remember texting him just to check up on him, be like, are you okay? And he was like, no. I didn't really know what to say. I'm like, I don't know what's true and what's not true. I don't know this side of him. And it was just such eerie timing, to watch him kind of lose his true self. And then this comes to light right after. And it was painful. It was so hard to watch someone you love go through that. And at a time too, when I had my own concerns and feelings about him and his behavior. And I wanted him to be okay. I wanted to be there for him as a friend at the very least, but I just couldn't handle his way of dealing with it. And so I just had to separate myself. And we had like one FaceTime call because I didn't want to hear all the stuff that was coming out. I wanted to hear it from him. Like, tell me what's true and what's not true, because I know some of it has to be true or else it wouldn't be happening. But I don't think all of it's true. And I wanted to give him the chance to speak for himself rather than believe what's on the internet. And I never got to do that. We did have one FaceTime call. It was just so weird. Like we got on the call and I'm just like looking at him and I didn't say anything and out of nowhere, but I'm thinking in my head, like, well, where are you? And out of nowhere, without me speaking, he's just like, I'm right here. I was like, no, you're not. This isn't you. And it was just eerie. It was like someone was in his body or something.
So eerie.
And I remember texting him at one point after that, because like I used to be able to connect to his energy pretty easily. Like if it wasn't already connected, I could just tune in. But then when this started happening, I would try to tune into him and there was nothing. And I was freaking out because I was like, this feels really weird. Like it's almost like he's gone, you know? And so I remember texting him and being like, all I can feel is your ego. And he was like, that's sad because I'm so much more than that. I know, but right now, I don't know. And so as this is all happening, it was like, one, I'm like losing him to his ego. And then two, now he's being canceled and his name is being like dragged through the mud. And I have to just sit and like watch this all crumble. And it was really painful. I mean, like physically painful, emotionally painful. I really did mourn for him like you would a dead person, because to me, it was, even though I could call him or text him, that wasn't him. You know, I wasn't
Right.
talking to the same person anymore. So it just felt like he was just gone and I didn't know where he was. And so it was just a really intense time. And then maybe 2 months after getting canceled, we're supposed to have a phone call conversation, the two of us, to just talk about everything. And the week before, I'm on a camping trip with a friend and I'm like, okay, let me go look at his page. So I had stopped following him because it was just too much. Like, let me go look at his page and just kind of like feel in to where he's at and what's going on in his life. And without much effort, I came across some stuff and I found photos of him with this other girl that was his girlfriend, apparently, that went back to when him and I were together, even. And I just screenshotted it and I sent him the photos. And I was like, I don't think we need to have that conversation. And it just like hit me like a semi truck to see that, just to see it in my face, to have it, the proof is there now. And it was a good portion of the time that we were together.
Wow.
And it was like a whole other girlfriend. And I just started bawling and I was just standing there. And thankfully I was alone at this moment. And I was just looking at the sky and I was like, I am so done with this. Like, I will do whatever it takes to not have to experience this betrayal anymore, because I knew that was my pattern. Like, dating men that end up cheating on me was something that I had done many times. And so as mad as I wanted to be at him for doing it, I was also mad at myself. Like, why am I attracting this? Like, what is going on with me? And so I made a vow to do whatever it takes to not repeat this. And I really, really meant it, because that ruined me in that moment. But it also saved me, because I could see now that I needed to heal in big, big ways. And I sent him a text, or he responded back, and he was like, it was such a bad response. He said, the truth will always be revealed and the truth will always set you free. I'm here if you want to talk. And I was like, fuck off. Like, fuck off. That is, how about sorry? How about anything close to an apology, you know? And so with that response, I'm like, wow, he's gone. Like, that is not a compassionate response. That's not a response you give to someone that you love, that you want to work things out with, you know? And so I was just like, yeah, no, I don't need to have that conversation. And so I just kind of typed up in a poetic type format the last things I wanted to say to him. And I wanted to tell him, I'm like, you know, I see now why you're being canceled and why this is happening to you. I would never join in on that, but I see now. And, you know, I called him out. He's a liar. And, and he's all these things. And it was clear to me that I needed to heal and that I was going to do that. And it was kind of my goodbye letter. And so, and that was it. He never responded. And that was we didn't speak for like 3 years after that,
Oh my God.
which I didn't anticipate. So this experience like brought me into my deepest part of my healing because of course it sent me into a deep depression. Just mourning the whole relationship, having all these magical experiences, and then having it end like this was just so confusing to me. How could something so beautiful and so badly? And at this point too, I also felt so different than I felt that whole year leading up to this because all that magic and all that beautiful stuff that was happening, it felt like I had been on this high floaty cloud and suddenly I just got dropped right onto the ground in a pile of burning lava. And it was just a shock. Like all the magic felt like it was gone. Everything felt like it was gone. And it almost felt like a big cosmic joke, to be shown like, look how intuitive we all can be and how everything is connected, how beautiful and synchronistic, and look at all these beautiful things. And you're shiny and you're powerful. And then it's like, boom, now you're nothing. And like you just feel empty. But I knew at that point, I was like, okay, I can get back there on my own. I don't need him to do it, although it made it so much easier. But I think that's part of it is it's meant to show you what we're all capable of. And if you take the journey of healing, you can get back there again, but it's actually even more powerful because it's sustainable. And so I knew it would be a long journey and I knew it would be hard, but I just had this feeling of like, it's time. Like if I'm going to become who I'm supposed to become in this life, I know there's a list of really challenging things I need to address that I've been kind of avoiding. And so I had, in the synchronicities, they don't stop, they continued. And so I had some synchronicities that kind of led me like breadcrumbs to my healing. And I had like these 2 clients in a row that I tattooed that had stories. One was adopted and found her mom on Facebook, and the other one had a sister that was adopted. And like, I was hearing these
Wow.
adoption stories all in one week. And I was just like, I think it's time. Like, I
Oh,
think I need to
wow.
find my family and find my biological mom. And it was also inspiring too to have been with my twin flame and see that he had already made that connection and found his biological family. And, it can be done. And doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean that once you find them, it's all like rainbows and butterflies either. It's not. So I I finally felt ready. And I don't know that if all this didn't happen, what would have like pushed me to finally like take that jump. Because it was always in my mind that I wanted to do that. It's not an easy thing to do. So to get the like ambition to go
Yeah.
for it, something has to happen. And so I, gosh, maybe 6 months after all of this happened, I found my biological mom. And then a month after that, on my 30th birthday, I went to go meet her in person. And then a month after that, there was things I needed to address with my adoptive parents about abuse that had happened. And I wrote letters to both of them and delivered them to their door and kind of dropped that bomb. And I was just letting everything happen all at once. And it was really intense. And I was really emotional that whole time. I mean, I was a mess. I was just a shell of a person because I was unraveling everything I never spoke about and everything that I didn't want to face. I was just facing every fear head on and yeah, it sucked. It sucked, but it was beautiful. But yeah, it was really, really, really hard. And also, as all of this is happening, I began dating my now husband, which didn't know at the time that that's who he was. But at some point, um, After uh the shock of what my twin flame did, and after I kind of moved through the depression and started healing, I I was meeting my mom at this time, and it was just so heavy, and I was sitting with it and I'm like, I'm ready for partnership. Like, I'm tired of doing everything on my own. I don't want to, and I at this point I can't. Like, I can't. I've always been so strong and so independent and been able to like hold everything for myself and others at times. But all the stuff that I was about to undo was just so big that I just couldn't do it on my own. And so I went into this really cool crystal shop with this really magical owner, Nancy. And I was like, hey, I know I can't do love spells. I'm not trying to do a love spell. I just want to open myself to a partner. And she was like, okay, here's this oil. Put this on a candle and ask the universe for what is for your best and your highest good. And I
Oh,
was like, okay, that sounds fair. That sounds clean. I'm not going to get in trouble. That's not a love spell. I'm just opening.
yeah.
And so I did a meditation and I did what she told me to do. And I released so much, even in that. I released like this idea that I have to do it on my own. I released this idea that I have to be this independent woman that doesn't need a man. And I just let all of that go and realized, like, no, I can be independent and I can be powerful and I can have a partner that helps me deal with this crazy life that we're all in. And so at this time, I already knew my husband. He was a client of mine and I knew he had a crush on me. So I'm doing the meditation. I'm asking for what's for my best and my highest good. And I was like, just not him. Because he was like way too into me. I was like, just what's for my best and my highest good, but not this guy. And the universe was like, you don't get to choose. I was like, damn. So I kind of knew right then, maybe it's him. So, and it was. I had a few other people, one of which was my biological mom, that are intuitive, that kind of let me know, like, yeah, there's something with this guy. Like, you're not gonna want to get rid of him like you think you are. And so, again, that was my old way of being, of like just pushing away the person that's actually interested in me. So, yeah, after I met my mom is when him and I started actually dating. And he was just so compassionate and like holding so much space for me and, you know, cooking me dinner when I couldn't peel myself off the floor from crying and just being there for me, but allowing me to also be there for myself. So I don't like to be coddled, I need to get through things, but I also want some support. And he was just so patient and so kind about all of it. And he saw me at my worst from the beginning. I was a mess. Like, Kimber, I was a mess. Like, I was crying a lot and I was anxious a lot and I was missing work a lot. And it was just so much. And at the same time, I'm starting this relationship with this man who is just nothing but good to me. And I'm also healing relational trauma, because you don't really heal relational trauma until you're in a
Like
relationship.
100%.
And it's all getting triggered. And so it was just so many moving parts at once. And I had a lot of beautiful tools. Like, I was learning Reiki at the time. And then later on, I was learning Theta. And I have, my beautiful, like, powerhouse of female healers around me to support me and hold me. So I was doing all the things. And yeah, he was just patient for all of it. I mean, the first year was really rough. Like, there was many times when he was like, I thought you were going to break up with me and just run away and like ditch this whole thing. Cause that was my response. I'm like, this thing is too good. Let's run away from it because we can't handle that, I guess. And so, yeah, I all this was happening, and then I never heard from my twin flame. But then there was this time, I think in 2022, I was in Barcelona with my husband, and I was there to get tattooed. It was this big tattoo transformation. I was doing many days in a row. It's a ceremony essentially, and it was really impactful. I mean, I truly do believe that pain is a portal and it's another way to reach these higher states. Not my most recommended way. But it is a way, and I never experienced it like that until this experience. And it was just ironic because I was out there in Barcelona, and then I was friends with my Twin Flames tour manager, and I see that she's posting on her story that she's in Barcelona. And I was like, "Are you here, right?" Like, she's like, "Yeah, he has a show. I take it you two aren't friends because you weren't at the show." And I was like, "No, we're definitely not friends." And I was like, "What are the odds? Like, to be in a
Well,
different country and be minutes away from each other." And so I was just like, and then going into this huge transformation, like, what is happening right now? Like, this is all a lot. And after my first session, it was really intense. And I was in this state that is the closest state to bliss that I ever experienced. And I was feeling so deeply humbled after that experience. I mean, I had cried and like tremoring, and I was releasing a lot of stuff in that. And so afterwards, my body just felt cleansed, and I felt so centered and so humbled and so clear on what's important and what's not important. And I remember feeling like, I want this feeling forever. I don't want to ever forget this feeling. And it was that night I was sitting on the couch, and my husband had gone to get food from the grocery store to cook. And I hear angels singing. I was like, "Oh, I'm really losing it." Never heard that before. Wow, I am not on this planet right now. And it's such an out of body experience. And, but also puts you so deeply in your body because that's where all the pain is happening and you can't escape it. And so that's happening. And then his tour manager is messaging with me, and she sends me this really sweet message about, "I always had a special place for you in my heart. It makes me sad that you two aren't friends, but life is crazy, and I just hope that you two get the chance one day to sit down and talk about everything." And I was so heart opened in that moment that I really sat with it, and I was like, I hope for that too. And I love him more than he knows. And so it was a really beautiful healing moment. Nothing came of it. I never heard from him. But then I think it was like that happened in like September. And then April of the following year, I was feeling like, okay, this bubble needs to burst. Like, I want to move forward with my current partner, but there's this unfinished business, and I can feel it. I mean, I would still have dreams about him,
huh?
and like from time to time, and it was always such strange stuff. Like, oh gosh, I remember when he started getting canceled, I had this dream about him, and he was like drunk and on drugs in the dream. Like, he was so not coherent, and I couldn't make sense of anything he was saying. And I was like, wow, okay, that's telling. And then after that, I had another dream about him where he had writing on the side of his head. And it was writing that was like reminding him of how to act.
Whoa.
And I was like, okay, that's weird. Maybe that's progress. Like, maybe he's trying to like come back to himself. So yeah, like, it never stopped. There was always little moments where his energy would come back in. And of course, I was frustrated that I hadn't heard from him. I mean, he was claiming to be on this healing journey after everything that happened with getting canceled, and claiming that he was righting his wrongs with the women that he's hurt in his past. And I was like waiting for my phone call. I was like, really? That's funny because I haven't heard anything. And so, yeah, I was angry and I was sad and I was hurt and I was confused as to why am I not hearing anything? And So yeah, I'm moving forward with my partner at the time, and I just want to be able to like be more fully in it and not have this lingering thing. And so I was like, I feel like I have to reach out to him. Like, is he ever gonna reach out to me and break the silence? And so I did. And he admitted to being embarrassed that I reached out first. I'm like, I gave you 3 years. I'm like,
Yes.
I was patient.
Mhm.
And he said that he had written up a message to me many times and just never was able to hit send. And that he's thought about me and everything. And like, he apologized through text for all this stuff. And I was hoping that it would get to a point where we could like actually have a real conversation. But it didn't take long for us to start triggering each other. And for me to kind of see that he had a lot of healing still to do. And then in hindsight, so did I. I was still angry, you know?
Mhm.
And so it wasn't going to take much for him to say to set that off. And so I look back at the conversation that happened from me reaching out, and it was a bummer because it wasn't. I thought we'd be further than that at that point after all those years, and I think I was more willing to make the effort to make that happen, but it just didn't end well. I think it kind of ended with us realizing that texting wasn't working, and he offered, like, I think we should talk about this in person. And I was like, yeah, I'm totally okay with that. And then I never heard from him about that. So that's where things left. And I guess I got what I needed, the closure that I needed, because it showed me like this is where he's at, and that if he was in a place to have that conversation with me, he probably would have reached out. So me
Mhm.
reaching out wasn't going to change that. Yeah, I just learned to accept that sometimes people don't change or they don't heal, or maybe my idea of them healing is not the same as theirs. And it is very much that thing of like, we both went into a dark night of the soul around the same time, but we handled it very differently.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that was over a year ago that that ended. And I just let it go. I was just done with it. And then recently, what happened is, so then between that time, I actually got married,
Mhm.
and yeah, I've still a constant healing journey, right? And so when you started this podcast, it brought it back up for me again. And it kind of forced me to sit with everything again, which is good because I'm a different person now than I was a year ago, 2 years
Mhm.
ago. And so it's important for us to revisit things because we have new perspectives the more we heal. And so a month ago now, less than a month ago, I was sitting in meditation and I was pulling cards and I was reflecting on another dream I had of him that I couldn't shake. And I couldn't remember what happened. It just couldn't shake the fact that he was in my dream and it was very in my face. And so I'm trying to sit with it to sort it all out. And it kind of showed me that there's more letting go that needs to take place. And I was like, okay, how much more can I let go? 'Cause I have let go so many times.
Totally.
I mean, it's constantly teaching you surrender and non-attachment. And even when I was with him, I was constantly practicing letting it go because there would be card pulls I would do that, prompt you to like offer up what is the most important thing to you. And I would offer up this connection of ours and practice letting that go and preparing. And I guess in hindsight, it was preparing me to accept that it's so much bigger than that. It's not about that. It's beyond that. And so I'm just like, okay, what else is there to let go? And so I'm meditating with it, and I was like, oh, forgiveness. I need to forgive. And I realized that by holding on to disappointment of how it happened or how it didn't happen, and holding on to the sadness and the anger was just keeping me attached to it and draining my energy and keeping me in those emotions. And so I was sitting with it and I was like, wow, I think I'm actually ready to forgive. Like, I don't want to carry these things anymore. I have no room for them. And so I thought about every scenario between the two of us. And I'm like, do I forgive this? Do I forgive this? Do I forgive this? And I was like, yes, I do. And then I was like, okay, I feel like I need to say it to him. And I even questioned myself on that. I'm like, okay, why though? Do we need to open this can of worms again? Like, what's our intention for doing that? Let's make sure it's coming from the right place. And for me, it just felt like finalizing it. Like, if I say it, if you say the words, they are true. And it puts it out into the universe. And also it is like offering a gift to this person, just letting them know that I've forgiven, which is me letting go. It has nothing to do with him. It's my choice. And I thought, like, this is liberating for me to forgive him and to just put this to rest and let it go and not feel anything I've been feeling about it for the past 5 years. And if it liberates him too from his shame, then awesome. And so I sat with it. I'm like, do I say it to him? And I was like, what if he responds really shitty? Do I still forgive him? You have to be prepared for everything. And I was like, yeah, I do. It's really not about him anymore. I'm doing this for me. And so I said it to him, and I said it really simple. And he responded well, and that was that. And I just let it be. And so now, and that was very recent. So now we're just in this different phase of this whole thing where, oh my God, it's like the onion layers just keep getting peeled back. But it's nice to be in this place. So, yeah.
So nice. I love that. And I loved what you said about, we have these opportunities to heal on an even deeper level. That's what I feel like when we ascend or we heal, those same lessons come back around, but to heal from a different perspective, which brings that healing into an even deeper space, which is pretty great. How does it feel differently with your husband versus him? Because I love that you were able to open up to a divine partner, a husband, someone that's there and awake and aware. What's the different feeling for you, even physically or emotionally?
It's very different. I think with a twin flame, everything is very like potent and loud and fiery and energetic and electric. And that can feel very exciting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is exciting and it's powerful, but it's even that comes with a price, right? And so it took me a minute with my husband because everything felt gentle and sweet and soft and just pure. And I was like, what is this? Like, I
Wild.
had only
Yeah.
had bad experiences with previous partners. So something that just felt good and pure to me. At first, I really had to work through my conditioning because at first it felt boring. Like, this isn't exciting, like, where's all the crazy stuff? But then in the hindsight, I'm like, I've had those crazy experiences. I have the stories to tell. I don't need to have that for the rest of my life. And in ways you still do because that connection is still there. And there's still, like I said, the magic comes back. I still have synchronicities and
Yeah.
magical things happening in my day to day. It was just super lit up that year, but now it's continued, but it's more stable. And so it took me some time to work through my programming of really being attracted to like the bad boy and the excitement and all that stuff, and just realizing like, no, if I want to have a family and have a home and I want these things, I want something stable, you know? And one
Yeah,
of my mentors, she was like, Amber, you don't want to have a family with the bad boy. Like,
totally.
he's not going to be there for you, you know? And I'm like, that's a really good point. You
It's a
don't want
really great
that.
point. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I worked through that. And to me, my husband feels like a soulmate because it does feel easy and it feels, I do feel like we've had a life or two or more together before. And but there is a lot less like karma to clear between the two of us. It's just a lot easier. And we're not triggering each other all the time. So
Yeah,
it's nice in that way. But yeah, it's a very different feeling. But I do think um if you want the long term thing, a soulmate is the way to go.
yeah. Does he know about the twin flame?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I told him from the very beginning when we started dating because I was still healing through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very honest with him, like, hey, I'm still working through what happened between me and my ex. And this is why it's so, impactful for me because it's not just the cheating, it's also this whole year of these wild experiences that I had to kind of
Right.
make sense of what was all that then. And so I was very honest with him of the raw state that I was in and what that person was to me and how how I view a twin flame and what that means. And he's been really good about it. I mean, it's not something that he knew about before, and he would just ask questions and get clear about it, and he didn't judge it, and he believes me, and he's not insecure about it.
That's amazing. That's beautiful because it could be so
Yeah.
triggering for somebody.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah.
it's even moments when like maybe something's coming up that would make him insecure. He's just like, no, this is our lifetime together.
Wow.
And I really do feel that because I mean, I felt like when I was with my twin flame, especially when it was ending, I was like, I don't think we're going to do it in this lifetime, not together at least. I just don't. There's so much that we both had to clear for our lineages
Yeah.
that it would have taken so much effort for both of us to clear, especially to clear everything and be able to make that work. And so, yeah, I've told him everything so
I
far.
love that because I've always thought if I did decide to get in a soulmate relationship, I would have to say something just because it's so prevalent in my life. Obviously, it's my work. So
Yeah.
obviously, the person would have to know. But
Yeah.
I've always thought that, like, I would have to tell them because it is something that just comes back around. Not a lot, but every once in a while, once a year, it comes back pretty intensely. And that person would have to be aware.
Yeah. It just
Mm-hmm.
makes it easier to not have to hide it. Like when he ended up in Barcelona
Mm-hmm.
at the same time as us, I told him.
Wow.
I
Yeah,
was like,
that's
just
a
in case
really
we run into him or something.
holy, that's a secure man though. That's amazing because I don't think this is for everyone to tell. Like people that do have it and their relationship, the guy's not there to hear it. Maybe you don't have to tell, but for
Yeah.
you, I love that your beautiful husband's so grounded and secure in this because it's really helpful for you to be able to go through it and explain to him what's going on with you, especially in that
Yeah.
deep transformation of what you did with your body and that tattooing. And yeah, so you can hold space on an even deeper level. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And so much of my healing journey too has been about speaking my truth and speaking to things that I like, not keeping secrets anymore for the sake
Totally.
of protecting other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went into my relationship with him already beginning the deep healing and realizing, like, if I'm going to do another relationship with someone, we're going to be very honest with each other.
Love that.
And whoever I date needs to be okay with that. And
Yeah.
yeah, and you're right. It's part of our journey forever. And so I don't want to have to hide any part of me from the
Mm-hmm.
person I want to spend my life with.
Yeah. I love that so much. What do you feel like the journey is? Like, I think it's so interesting. When you were talking, I thought, your ego was dissolving while he was putting on his ego, which is so fascinating because that's the same thing that happened to me. I had a full ego death, and then he started to, for sure, but then just all of a sudden this it erected this new being that I did not recognize. It's very fascinating.
Yeah. I think it's like ego deaths are scary, right? So when you start to feel it, it's really bringing up the deepest parts of you that you maybe don't want to deal with. And unless you're willing to go there, I could see how people could go into defense mechanism, and that looks like narcissism sometimes, and lean into that to avoid the discomfort of having to deal with whatever is coming up to be let go. When in actuality, it's far better to just go through it, like sit there and let it have its way with you and go through it and come out of it and just let that shit go and feel reborn.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I guess that's part of the twin flame thing is like we're doing the opposite
The equal and
things, right?
opposite things. But I also, it just hit me when you were talking about how many mentors you had around you and how many feminine energies to support you. And the masculine doesn't necessarily have that. Like when I was going, who, at least I had a friend that I could talk to. Who was he going to talk to about this, if that makes sense, without being like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, dude, you're completely crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thought. But even with, like you were saying, the podcast brought it back up for you to heal on a deeper level. What's happened for me is I let it go on such a deeper level. I think speaking the truth and coming out such a bold way, talking about it, has completely, like, for me right now, at this moment, I don't care at all, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, he's just, bless him on his way. And it's completely, you know how it comes in waves, like all of a sudden it's so present. It's like a waves hit you, tsunamis hit you, and you're dealing with emotions, and then the tide goes out so far that it feels really remote. And that's where I'm feeling, but I was equating it to speaking. And I'll be
Mm-hmm.
very curious what happens after, now that you've told your story and spoke your truth, of how that helps, because I think it festers in the dark.
It
And
does. I was actually sitting with that this morning, Kimber, because I was like, of course, there's a part of me that's resistant to telling the story because I'm like, it was so long ago. Let's just let it go and
oh,
pretend it didn't happen and not talk about it anymore. But the reason I wanted to share is obviously you've been a mentor of mine through this whole journey with me. And also, even if you take away the twin flame thing, it's a pretty wild story. Like,
uh-huh.
my life from when that started to where it is now has been this like series of events that has forced me into healing, and not even forced me because I at some point went willingly like, fuck it, let's do it. But it really brought me into this place of like, you need to heal. Look at this stuff. Like, you think you're healed, but look at all of this. Let's really do the work so you can be who you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's what it's about. And I do feel like talking about it helps to kind of, in a way, put it to rest and allow it to become something else. It's almost like planting a seed. It's like we're putting it back into the earth and maybe it'll blossom into something different. And I do think there's so much power in telling our stories. And that is a way of releasing them. So as much resistance as I had around sharing this, because I never told him, you know. So of course part of me is like, oh God, what if he hears it, you know? But I'm just like, whatever, I don't care anymore. Like, this story happened. I didn't ask for this, you know? This
Totally.
happened. And so it's worth sharing. And I feel like sharing it also helps me see the parts of it that are helpful to anyone and everyone. Because it's really just a journey of how we heal. How do we awaken and heal? And there's a million ways for that to happen. You know, it could be this, it could be another life-changing event, it could be heartbreak, it could be death of some sort. Like, whatever gets you to start healing in a deep way and gets you to start connecting with the universe in a different way and with yourself, then that's what it's about, you know?
Totally. And it's so interesting because our stories are so similar. We have a lot of synchronicities in that they're both pretty successful musicians, and our childhood trauma got hit in our face with it to
Mm.
actually go on that healing journey. So in that space, that was a gift, and bringing you into your healing gifts. I remember years ago, this other healer, I did a session on him, and he was like, holy shit, that's really powerful. Like, what the hell? He goes, that didn't come for free though. And he goes, you paid a
Mm.
deep price for that, didn't you? And I was like, I did. And that stuck with me. And when you were talking earlier about there's a price to pay with that, but it also leads you into your sacred gifts and leads you into what you're here to do. And I've watched your transformation. It's been stunning and beautiful. And I wish that we could share our voice notes that we have with each other, because we, Amber asks the best questions, and it's what comes through, or it's so deep. So maybe at some point we'll have to just like earmark it and have you back and ask where we can go deeper into the whys and the hows and the whats, because it just keeps unfolding and unfolding in such an interesting way. And I loved what you said at the beginning. Like, we don't really know what this is. There's a great idea of what it is, but what is it really?
Yeah, I mean, it's a catalyst.
Uh-huh.
And like I was saying, many things can be that. I think this is just one way. And it's a really interesting way. I think it's a kind of, I mean, I think most ways are seen as taboo because people don't see things as portals into healing or awakening. They kind
Uh-huh.
of see things as happening to them. And that's not true. You know, like, yes, things happen to us, but we have the ability to turn it into something and take whatever that thing is and be like, okay, what is the universe trying to teach me? What am I supposed to be learning or healing through this
Uh-huh.
to, evolve my spirit?
Totally.
And so, yeah, as far as the twin flame, I don't know what it is, but I think it's a powerful connection. I think it was a really eye-opening experience to show me how we are all so deeply connected, and not just us to our twin flames, but all of us and everything. People, plants, animals, all of it is so connected. And we know these things like, oh, everything's connected. But when you get to experience it in some kind of way and feel it, it just hits so differently. And
Good.
these are the things that start to help us change permanently. You start to move through life differently. You perceive things differently. And it's just through experience. And so, yeah, I would love to learn more about what is the twin flame journey? Why
Yeah.
is it a thing? Where did it come from? What is all of it? But I think when I get in my head about it, I just try to simplify it and remember, like, okay, well, what did it do for me? It helped me heal. It helped me learn about what is beyond the veil of what we see every day. And it it kind of pulled me into learning things and learning healing and meeting my mom, and like it pulled me into
Yeah.
all of these things that I needed to do. And so, yeah, I just think it's just a catalyst,
Yeah. It's
a
a
really
path to
interesting one.
self-realization. And like, I think it is just it's a lot of things. I think that's the problem. You can't really explain it in one line. It's a lot of things, but it is a deep path to self-realization and helping us understand that connectivity. Like when he saw your thoughts and you guys became telepathic. It's like, that's a gift that we all have. I don't know if you've watched the telepathy tapes yet. Have you heard
No.
of that? Babe.
Wait, where can I watch this?
I will send you, it's on YouTube, Spotify. It's 10 episodes of the first season, and basically this woman dives into nonverbal autistic kids, and that they meet in a
Oh,
place called the Hill, and they're telepathic, and they start having connections and meeting people in different states just through telepathy. And it reminded me in a completely different way of the twin flame journey. Like we meet in the astral, we meet in the other world, have these telepathic connections that's inexplicable with the scientific world, or that world of matter, that Newtonian world of physics that we have. And now it's opening up on a different way of showing people like, look, telepathy is real, these deep connections that can't be explained are real. And so you'll love it. And anyone who's listening, you have to listen to it. I was riveted. And over like 2 or 3 days, I listened to the whole season.
That's gonna be me.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's amazing. But it's just another form of this. We have these gifts, and this is like a way, what for me, this is a whole digression. But years ago, I had this woman, and she said, I have this nonverbal autistic son. And the Akashic said, oh, because where he's from, that's the way they communicate. And then the second episode, one of the kids say, well, Mom, that's where I'm from. That's the way we communicate. And I was like,
How funny.
and yeah, so there's just a lot of, it's just interesting. But anyway, I love that. Thank you. I love your story so much. And I know it continues to unfold, and it'll be so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been many years of it, and it's just it now such a long story, and I hope I did it justice, because I wish I could just like grab people and take them on that ride with me and be like, no, look, it's been a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
but it's been magical and transformative and painful, and it's been everything, but it's been worth it, you know? I wouldn't I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't ever choose to not do it, because I fully believe it's a huge part of what led me to become who I am today. And for that, I
Absolutely.
am so grateful.
Yeah, I love that. What did he say? Just the last up, what did he say to you when you were on mushrooms and you started questioning and overthinking?
Stop trying to figure it out.
I think I was thinking that through this whole thing, just experience the twin flame journey, and you
Yeah.
don't have to figure everything out. It's fun too, but
And isn't that ironic that that's how it started? Was that message? That's what I mean. I'm like, there was moments
totally.
where he would just channel things, and I'm like, do you know more than I know? Like, did you plan this or something? Because
It,
what is happening?
it's weird because, okay, so this is obviously we're still talking, but it's so weird because I know I've told you this, but years ago, many years ago, when we were going through our intensity, and he was telling me I was too fragile. And he's like, you're too fragile. You can't walk around the world like that. You're going to learn how to have a thicker skin. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. And I was like, what's that mean? And I go, what does that mean? And he said, I know where you're going, and I know what you're here to do in this life. Trust me, you're going to have a thicker skin.
Oh my gosh, I just got chills.
And I was like, what? And looking back, I'm like, he knew the whole time, and was pushing me and kept pushing me and kept pushing me into being better. And
Yeah.
I didn't understand at the time. I thought he was being mean. And I look back and I'm like, oh, he knew.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what was going on. And again, another time I was in a deep meditation, and I think I've told this story before, but I was up in the ethers, and he's like, I'm up here. I'm not back there. Keep coming. And I realized, oh, there's part of him waiting for me to wake up. There's this higher dimensional version in a higher dimensional space. It's like, come on, keep coming, keep waking up, keep getting this, quit turning around and trying to wake up the human, because I'm up here. And I was like, so there's part of them that is, it's like they lead us up and then we lead them up, and it goes like, if that makes sense.
I believe that. I feel like we are, in a way, each other's gurus, you know?
Yeah. He's been
And
my
there's,
greatest teacher
yeah,
teacher in this world, for sure.
I
Hands
agree with
down.
that completely. And it's like, I do feel that. I feel like even though the human's doing one thing, I've seen his soul. He's powerful and he's connected, and
Yeah.
it just, he's all the things. Just that version of him maybe is somewhere else right now while he sorts out whatever he's sorting out. And the same for me. I'm sure there's a part of me that he saw from the beginning that I'm like oblivious to. I mean, there was even moments after we split up, we had a mutual friend, and like this is when I was waiting those 3 years for him to reach out to me. And somewhere in those 3 years, he was, like, telling our mutual friend, like, "Amber's powerful."
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay." But I didn't really realize yet, I don't think I even have yet, to what extent, you know? I think it's that's also part of the mirroring, right? It's not just the triggers that you mirror, it's also the truth of our souls that we mirror. And
100%.
it's helpful to have someone see that because you're like, "Oh, wait, I am? Like,
Right?
okay, I should figure out how to channel that or what to do with that." But yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and I think too, I mean, what he told me one time, and I think this is such a multidimensional path, but his soul told me that was the sacrifice. I took the lower timeline, I took that negative polarity so that you could know your power, so you could come and be the guide, the healer in that space without being that second supporter of him. And I think that often, like, that was maybe the men, I know it's more like the fear, the human, all that, but maybe they took that alternate lower timeline so that the feminine could rise and know her power and come
Mhm.
into her leadership and activate the goddess on the planet to
Yeah.
balance it out, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I think it's time for that, right? It reminds me of this really trippy story. But I was in my Reiki class and I, when you take those classes, you're healing things throughout. So I was healing something with my twin flame at the time, and I was sharing it with the class. And one of the women in it was super intuitive. And she messaged me after class and she was like, "When you were talking, I had a vision of a past life with the two of you." And she was like, "What happened was he was this like wealthy guy and you were this poor healer woman and you were going to be hung, as a witch. And he was in the audience and he just like looked at you right before it happened, like, I'm sorry. Like, like he
Wow.
couldn't do anything or he didn't try to do anything and just kind of let it happen." And I was like, geez, okay. And so I had done some work with that and I saw it for myself. And it was so interesting too, because then as he was being canceled years ago, he kept referring to it as being hung in public. And I was like, well, maybe it's your turn. I don't
Wild.
know. It's
Yeah.
interesting, right? Like how I'm sure in past lives when women were shoved down even more, obviously everyone plays into that. And now it's like the roles reverse and it's time for the women to rise. And even in these very intimate connections of these journeys, it's even more palpable.
But even like in a more healed way where the women rise and then we bring the masculine with us
Yeah.
because we can't do it alone. And that's what I think what you're doing in your marriage too. Like let's create this union together, which I love. So
Yeah.
my last question, what advice would you give someone that just is starting on this journey that you wish you knew?
Stop trying to figure it out. No, I knew that and I still would try.
Perfect.
But also just ride the wave. Just let it happen and remember that this is about so much more than that. It's so much bigger than you can imagine. And it's about your healing and that it's for you. So just stay focused on that. Let everything else happen and enjoy the ride.
I love that.
Eating your necklace now.
I know. I think he has to go outside. So,
He's like,
well,
excuse me.
excuse me. He just did his little whine. I'm like, oh, okay. So, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I love you so much.
I love you. Thank
Amazing.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for watching Beyond the Veil. Please like, subscribe, and share so we can grow our channel. If you have a story you would like to share, please email nandipresents@gmail.com. If you're interested in classes or personal sessions, please visit nandi.co, Nandi.co, and have a magical